Hello good people of the internet, my name is Andy and this is Geek Curio, and today we're going to be talking about several branded miniature companies. So where you can get your miniatures from, places like Games Workshop, Reaper, Whiz Kids and more. And I'll be right back after this. Hello and welcome back. As part of my So You Want to Be a Miniature Painter series, I did touch upon some of the branded miniature companies that are out there. And in this video we're going to go through them in a little more detail. I've also reached out to my friends at the Goblin of Mordor to find out about more miniature companies that I'm not currently aware of. And believe it or not, the list is quite exhaustive. If I was to do a review or update on every single one of them, this video could run into hours. So what I'm going to do is at the end, I'm going to list on the screen some other miniature companies and give a quick honourable mention. But first of all, I want to cover some of the miniature companies that I use so I can give my personal views on their pros and their cons. So the first company I'm going to be talking about is Reaper Miniatures. Now Reaper Miniatures is a company in North America. They've been producing miniatures for about 27 years, I think it is. I know they recently had their 25th anniversary a couple of years ago. Now the good thing about Reaper is they do lots of different materials and they have a huge range. So I'm just going to show you some of the ones that I have here. Got things like Ogre Clubbers, Mudcroak, we've got a couple of spiders in a box, plus pretty much loads and loads of different characters that you can have as miniature characters in your D&D campaigns or Pathfinder campaigns. A lot of the miniatures can actually be used as NPCs or enemies as well. Now, like I said, they have a very huge range. And the other thing that I like is they do quite a lot of their same models in lots of different materials. So they'll do it in the white plastic resin type material, the hard plastic and metal as well. And this works well because different miniature painters like working with different materials. For me, I've always been happy with the Bones range, which is the white, cheaper material, mostly because I can buy a lot of minis at once. I'm also able to subscribe to the Reaper subscription box that Mighty Lancer Games do here in the UK, and I think they're doing that worldwide as well now. And also with the price, it means I get a lot more miniatures for my money. Now, the only not so much positives about the Reaper range is outside of North America and Europe, I understand it's quite difficult to get hold of. Here in the UK, we're quite lucky because we've got quite a few top distributors and retailers here. Another thing you have to be aware of is depending on the sculpt or the material, the Reaper miniature needs to be washed before you even start painting. Personally, I don't think this is a big problem. I just use a regular nail brush and some hand soap, and that normally helps. Trust me, you do want to wash them because there's normally quite a lot of mold release agent, and what this does is it prevents any paint from sticking to them. Trust me, I have fallen into this trap, and you do want to get these miniatures washed. Next up is another company called Whiz Kids. Now Whiz Kids again are based in North America, and this is one of their miniatures. This is literally the only one I've ever bought from them. And the good thing about Whiz Kids is they have the official Wizard of the Coast license for Dungeons and Dragons. When you open your monster manual and you find a monster, Whiz Kids have made that monster in the same detail using the same art as the official Dungeons and Dragons books. Now this is really useful if you wanted to put a lot of realism into your D&D campaign. However, a lot of the Whiz Kids models tend to be quite hard to get hold of. When I saw this Beholder, I had to grab it straight away because, well, if you were looking for a Beholder last year, it was literally impossible to get one anywhere. And if you did, you'd probably be paying about 5, maybe 6 or 7 times the price for it. Another benefit, and it's not a benefit that everyone loves, is that the miniatures come pre-primed. Now, if you're just getting into miniature painting and you want to start painting straight out of the box, then that's great. But some of the miniature painters that I've spoken to prefer to prime the mini themselves. And I've known a few people to use some abrasive chemicals to try and get them off the mini. So the third company, and this is probably the obvious one, especially as I have bought quite a lot of these in the past, and they are based in the UK, is Games Workshop. Now, the thing with Games Workshop is, yes, they have a huge range. Going back on the company's history, they used to be the official UK distributors of Dungeons & Dragons back in the 70s. Now they have two main games, which is Warhammer Age of Sigmar and Warhammer 40k, with 40k being set in the far future. Games Workshop have quite a large global presence as well, so it's quite easy for people to get hold of their products worldwide. There's a lot of variety, a hell of a lot of variety, and there's a lot of customization as well, so Games Workshop actively encourage that. You will find that when you buy a box of minis, you're not just buying enough to make 5 or 6 minis. You are pretty much able to customize them a lot. You'll have a lot of spares left over, which you can customize on other miniatures. Personally, I think that's a bit of a waste, and that's not something that I enjoy too much. I mean, I'd done 40k Space Wolves. I wasn't sure about the rules of the game. I ended up putting all sorts of different weapons on all my different Space Wolves, and when I actually played the game, it was actually even more complicated than it should have been. And also, I had a lot of wet leftover plastic. I do often wonder if in a couple of thousand years, someone's going to dig up and find one of my old sprues. Another benefit that Games Workshop have is they have the Lord of the Rings license. So they've had that since the first movies came out in the early 2000s. And a lot of what they're producing now is mainly geared towards the Hobbit movies. So on the downside with Games Workshop, they do tend to be on the expensive side. Now, when I first started getting into miniature painting a good 20 odd years ago, £5 used to get me a box of minis. This particular box cost me about £25. And this one here, I actually bought in a friendly local game shop for only £20, which was £5 off. But to be honest with you, I mean, if I can show you the quality of the miniatures nowadays, it's far superior to what it was 20 years ago. The other thing to look out for if you're going to go with Games Workshop, if you're just going for miniature painting, that's fine. Just bear in mind that models do tend to get discontinued or become hard to get. It all depends on how the game is progressing. So Games Workshop currently in the middle of doing a new rule set for Warhammer 40k, I understand. And as a Space Wolves collector, I've actually seen a lot of new models come out recently, but I would expect some of the models to no longer be relevant to the rules. That doesn't really bother me that much because I enjoy painting rather than playing. Another benefit that Games Workshop has is a huge following and community. How you interact with that community is entirely up to you. Some of them are really, really helpful, although I have found a few gatekeepers. Another company that's recently come up is Fantasy Flight Games. They actually have the license for Star Wars. So the pros, it's Star Wars. I haven't had any of their products yet, so I can't actually say anything about the quality. They do the Lord of the Rings board game, which is quite different from the Games Workshop war game. And they also have the license to produce stuff for Marvel and Game of Thrones. Just to point out, when I say Marvel, it's not Marvel Crisis Protocol. Another company I would like to mention is Warlord Games. Now, the interesting thing about Warlord is they do quite a lot of historical accurate games as well. So things like their Bolt Action range, which specialized in modern military combat from World War II right up until the Korean and possibly the Vietnamese War. They also have ancient historical combat as well. And we're talking Bronze Age. There's a specialist Hail Caesar game, which does a lot of Roman centurions. And the one that I particularly liked the idea of was Test of Honor, because I have quite a strong affinity towards Japanese and samurai type miniatures, and I ended up buying a box of that purely because I was able to paint samurai. Another interesting thing that they do is not just miniatures, but miniature vehicles and miniature warships, war combat games. One of them focuses on the old style wooden galleys, and the other one's focusing on more, once again, modernized warfare. So you can find yourself buying Kriegsmarine submarines, Royal Navy, as well as the American forces, and I think the other one's the Japanese too. And the license that they have and I love the most is Judge Dredd. Now, if anyone knows me, I'm a bit of a Dredd fan, but they pretty much have a license for most of 2000 AD comics products, and Judge Dredd is something I'm certainly going to be buying more of. I did actually pick up the board game last winter, and I've been painting that, but haven't got around to playing it yet. Having all the Judge Dredd miniatures, there's probably some sort of diorama that I'd like to take on as a larger project in the future. So now I'm going to be talking about some other companies. I'm just going to run down this list, which I have literally just in front of the camera in front of me, and I'll try and annotate where I can. So some other honourable mentions. You've got GaleforceNine. They're the people who also have the license to the D&D games, and they tend to do the high-end resin scale models. Normally you find that when a new D&D adventure is released, they will be doing models specific for that adventure. Steamforged, who I believe made the miniatures for Critical Role. Cool Mini or Not, those products I do actually have. I bought their board game Zombicide a couple of years ago, played that and absolutely brilliant. Those miniatures, very simple and look like they're easy to paint as well. Mantic, who are another company that are based out in Nottingham. I bought some of their stuff as well, Star Saga, and I really like the look of their Kings of War. That's something that's been on my wish list for some time. You've got Galladoria Games, which is a new company, Zealot, Atlantis, Bad Squiddo. I know that's Annie, who I knew from Twitter. She does some of her own sculpts as well as selling some other people's sculpts as well. She's particularly famous for her Shield Maidens, if I remember correctly. You've got Fenris Games, which is a company that I think was in Kent, and they're relocating to Lincoln at the moment. And I know Fenris Games, they do a lot of their own sculpts and do resin casting as well. High-end products, and if you check out Goblin Squire's website, he's recently done a review on some of their terrain. Mordiphius, that's another company that I've actually bought into. I got their Fallout Wasteland Warfare board game. Now I know they've had some criticisms about the quality of the plastic that they use. However, what I got was absolutely perfect. They also have the license to Star Trek Adventures, and I'm hoping to do a review of that soon. Pandemonium, Bearhead, Antediluvian Miniatures, Aenor, Dark Sword, Northumberland Tin, and Otherworld. And these were actually all recommended to me by Pandemonium Miniatures. Pandemonium I still need to check out. Paul is actually one of the members of the Goblins of Mordor. He's a brilliant painter, by the way. I've just been watching his Wood Elf Blood Bowl team being worked on, and his work is absolutely beautiful. But I'm hoping to speak to him in the next few weeks and also get to know about his miniatures and his miniatures company. So thank you very much. That is all from me today. If you enjoyed the video, please remember to leave a like. If you have any comments for me, just leave them in the comment section down below. And if you'd like to support me, and if you like what I'm doing, all you need to do is click on that subscribe button. So once again, thank you very much for watching. Stay safe and take care.